for 5 years and recently has completed her second term as president of the Tree Council of Ireland. So a busy, busy woman, but not too busy to put this book together. And it takes us on a trip. Well, you know what? Ian's going to tell us exactly herself what the book does and where it takes us, because she joins us now on the line. Ian, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? Can you hear me there? You can.
Loud and clear. Yes, I can see you on Zoom. Anybody can check us out on Facebook or on YouTube if they want to have a look as well. Now, this new book, it's part of the Colin series of, people will be familiar with these books. The covers are bright and colourful, and the books are very big, and it looks like a children's book, but it's not. It's for everybody.
Yeah, well, it's actually Gill's, not Collins.
Gill's, sorry.
You'll be shot.
Whoa.
So I have to say that they're Gill's. And they have brought out one every year for the last while. There's been one on farming, and there's been one on science, and there's been one on the weather, and there's been one on history. This one is on biodiversity, and it's much the best, of course, as you can imagine.
Of course, yes, yeah, absolutely.
So what it does is it tells us about all the biodiversity that we have in Ireland. I've laid it out in different habitats, because if you spoke about all the biodiversity in a woodland, then you would never mention fish, or you'd never mention seagulls. So I've taken different habitats, because that's what biodiversity is. It's the amount of different plants and animals we have, and the amount of different habitats where they live. So it's a whistle-stop tour of them all. I'm talking about woodland, I'm talking about bogs, I'm talking about the seashore, I'm talking about lakes, rivers, your garden, your hedge, grasslands, all of them ones that we have in Ireland,
and all the creatures that live. Yeah.
And I have a wonderful artist called Barry Falls, and he has drawn all of the creatures. The poor man, he must have really earned his few bob, because he has illustrated the books wonderfully, and they're scientifically correct as well too. The poor man, if he came back with 2 spots missing, I sent it back for the 2 spots to be added back on. So they're scientifically correct, they look lovely, and they make a great deal of extra benefit to the book.
So he had you in his ear throughout.
Well,
to make sure it was accurate.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, for the science, this is science. Biodiversity is study of life, the study of living things, and it's not Little Miss Muffet where they have all the legs on the spider's body. Spiders have all their legs on their head. I'm sure you know that.
Didn't actually know that, but I do now.
You do now.
And indeed, what about eyes? Yeah. How many eyes does a spider have?
Oh, they have 8 eyes, yeah. 8 eyes. All around the circle around its head, yeah.
Well, a lot of children's books would just have a couple of
eyes.
They're
all carnivores. But this might, as you said, look like a book. It's actually a family book, because it's written, I mean, it's not in big letters and big writing. It's a normal sized writing. The pages are large, and you could take a different section or a different bit, and children could read it. The adults could read it, because when I'm busy telling it to what people about it, a lot of the adults would never have had an opportunity to learn all this, because when they were in school, this wasn't taught at all. So like it's not a lecture book, and it's not a sciencey book that makes you have to know stuff. You can pick up this book knowing nothing, and it brings you through it very nicely when the pictures to match.
And the pictures to match, I was just going to say that it's a great idea to have illustrations, so long as they're accurate for a book like this, rather than photographs, because you can do so much more with the illustrations, and you can illustrate exactly what you're writing about, rather than trying to find a photograph that comes close.
That's right, yes. I mean, I have done Wild Dublin, and that was illustrated by photographs, and that's more difficult to get the things looking. Then you do get the bee, but it's flying away from you, only getting its bum rather than the picture of it at the side. Whereas Barry can actually tell us that the lizards, for example, have 5 toes on their front feet, whereas newts have 4 toes on their front feet. But I mean, if you were taking a photograph, would they be showing you their feet at that very moment? Not necessarily. So like from that point of view, it's great. And we've picked all sorts of exciting things to look at, and then I have given people jobs at the end of each section. So there's a bucket list of things you have to find from the woodland chapter. You've got to find a duck that nests in a tree. I mean, in the name of God, what are ducks doing nesting in trees? But there is a species in Ireland that does this, and the nests, so some of them are in Glendalough, for example. So that's something you might take an expedition off to see. Or you might want to go out and get the smelliest mushroom in Ireland, which is called the stinkhorn, a horrible thing. It's like the drain's gone wrong. And that would be an adventure as well. And then we have a section on the bogs, so I send people out to look for will-o'-the-wisps, and send them off to the National Museum, where they'll find the bog bodies and the bog butter, because of course bogs, nothing decomposes there, so that's why you have all the plants, that's why you have all the carbon stored there and all the water. And then of course you have plants there that eat insects. Normally insects eat plants, but on the bogs, the insects are eaten by the plants. So you can find them stuck to the flowers, and it looks great.
Well, up here it might be a bit easier for us to find a will-o'-the-wisp than head off to Glendalough. But we'll follow the instructions anyhow and do our best, because a lot of this stuff, it's becoming increasingly harder to find. Where was the stat back in 1970? And I'm old enough to remember the 70s. We had twice as much biodiversity as we have now.
Yeah, that's true. But it's not so much that we've lost half our species, it's that we've lost half the numbers, or more than half the numbers. I mean, up in Donegal, you have corncrakes everywhere. I mean, there are still corncrakes. Donegal is one of the few places where there are still corncrakes. You get them out on Torrey Island, and you get them off Mayo and Innisturk, and places like that. But Curlew is saying, so because of the fact that the grass is no longer mowed for hay, but it's silage, there's no ground cover. So these birds are being affected not by climate change so much as by changing agricultural practices. So this has caused a great reduction in the biodiversity of things that are affected by this. So by knowing this, by knowing it and by understanding it, then we can go out and try and improve this. And I mean, this has already been happening in places where they've been having no mow May. I mean, every bit of Ireland isn't a field of silage. So there's lawns, there's roundabouts, there's parks where you don't have to be giving it a number one haircut every minute, and you can let it grow, and then all the seeds that were in the soil come back, and you get wildflowers. Then there's stuff for the bees, and the bees come back, and the butterflies come back. And so people, instead of saying that and they all shocking, can do something themselves with whatever little small piece of land they have, or they can encourage the parks nearby, or they can stop whinging if they think the council aren't mowing the grass, because this is actually a policy that's going to improve biodiversity. And people love biodiversity. I mean, they're very fond of butterflies. They like to know there's bees there. They like to see the flowers. And of course, and there's different times of the year as well. Your garden is even a biodiversity place, even if you are putting in foreign plants, as long as they're not red, because bees can't see red. So no red roses, no red tulips. They're desperate. But if you put in things like purples and yellows, they're all Roscommon supporters. They're all Clare supporters. And they're the flowers that they actually love. Then you're going to have pollen and you're going to have nectar. It doesn't necessarily have to be native species. I mean, things like lavender, for example, the bees love those, and they're not particularly native to Ireland, but they're garden plants. And then if you go out at night, it's all different again. There's no light, there's no birds, nothing to eat you. It's more moist. There's snails, there's slugs, there's black beetles, there's earwigs, all those kinds of things. And you don't have to go far. Just go down in your pajamas with your torch, and you can see all the stuff, a different ecology in the garden at night. That's all my book, pictures of it everywhere.
I know. You're making it so we all want to get up and just to go out to discover all these things straight away. And the state of the situation really, I think, is summed up with the dedication you put in the book to your grandchildren. And in it you say, I hope you get to visit the many wild habitats described here, and that all these plants and animals and the places they live in will still be there for you to show your grandchildren.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I didn't want to be all gloom and doom in the book, but that's the situation that the world we find ourselves in, where we're having more and more space for roads and drainage and this sort of thing. And when attempts are being made to stop cutting the bogs, to re-wet land, this is seen to be something terrible, whereas in actual fact, it's putting back a little bit of space for biodiversity. So, but rather than preaching, I mean, and you just picked out that because that's the only thing I did put in the book, because all the rest of the thing I'm busy saying, these are here, this is where they live, and if the habitat is a bit better, there'll be more of them. I'm not gloom and doom and a cono because a cono, because if you get no hope at all, well, then you don't feel like doing anything. So when you know that there is a bog nearby, or you know that there's a hedgerow, and then you could plant more trees in it, everybody can improve where they live, whether they own the bit of land or whether they're encouraging somebody else to do it. And that'll be positive for everybody, because the wildlife cheers us up as well. It's good for our mental health to go walking in the woods. It's good for our mental health to go to the river and throw in stones and see what happens. These are all kinds of things that are nice. And this time of the year, even if it's the winter time, you can go off to the mud flats up in Inch or up on where the mud flats are, and watch all the waders that have come all the way from Scandinavia, where it's getting cold. Or you can go to where there's grassy places, and you might see the wild swans, you might see the wild geese, and they've come from far side. They've come from Arctic Canada. So you don't have to be the summertime and the good weather. All you need is a raincoat, a binoculars, and a bit of curiosity.
Yeah, year round. The book is called The Great Irish Biodiversity Book. How come you didn't call it the Great Irish Book of Nature?
Because what's nature? Are you a good nature chap? Are you a bad nature chap? Well, nature's only a descriptive word. It's a soft. I mean, this is a proper book. And I didn't call it the Irish Wildlife Book either. There's loads of those. But if you Google biodiversity, this is the one that comes up, the Irish Biodiversity Book. We had a biodiversity where we have a biodiversity crisis. We all know that. We had a citizens' assembly on biodiversity. Biodiversity is where it's at. That's why I wrote the book of where it's at, not nature, for goodness sake. What's that?
Fair enough. I'm not going to argue it.
So 25 quid, 25 euros in every good shop. Yeah. Rush out and buy it. And it's a family gift. So I would save you having to buy 4 presents. You just buy one for the household and that's your present sorted.
It'll look good on any bookshelf as long as you have a good big one.
Well, it doesn't want to be on the bookshelf. It wants to be on your knee.
Well, that too. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, listen, Anna, the best of luck with the book. I'm sure it will be a big seller. Given that it's come out now at a very timely part of the year, and it'll hopefully be gifted a lot over the Christmas, and it'll be read and browsed throughout the months ahead, and people will act on it and find out these places and go and discover them and make use of the biodiversity that is out there.
So if it piques their interest, that's what I want. Because once you know what's going on, then you can't say I didn't know, no one told me. You know now, I've told you.
Yeah, there you go. Amy Lerner, thanks a million for chatting. The book is called The Great Irish Biodiversity Book, and it is out now. There you go. There's a picture of it up on our Zoom call. Okay, thanks, Anna. Best of luck.
I'm laughing this. Go to my